Okay, everyone, this is part two of our comma exercise video. I'm going to try to move a little bit more quickly in this video. So we left off on number four, right? You, Mr. Gimbal, are the lucky winner of a ballpoint pen. And if you look at the screen, right, we separate out Mr. Gimbal with commas after you and after Gimbal, right? And the rule there is mode of address, okay? The main part of the sentence, you are the lucky winner of a ballpoint pen, satisfies the three criteria for a sentence: subject, predicate, complete thought, right? Mr. Gimbal is, just additional information to the sentence, right? So anytime you add additional information to a sentence, you want to make sure that you separate out that with commas, okay? All right, so let's look at number five. No, you cannot have a raise. And again, you can almost hear phonetically where the comma should probably land. And that obviously goes after the word no. And the rule there is an interjection, okay? Anytime you have a word like no or yes or oh, right? And again, it's additional information to the main part of the sentence. In number five, the main sentence is you cannot have a raise. Subject you, predicate cannot have a raise, complete thought, it's a sentence, right? And no is just a sort of interjection, right? It's just sort of an interruption into the sentence. It needs to be separated out with a comma, okay? All right, number six is one that we learned pretty early when we start attending school, right? Is how to write dates. So Friday, October 13th was the date of the wedding. You should have two commas there. Sometimes students fail to leave out that second comma after the day of the month, okay? And a good way to remind yourself not to do that is to think of the main part of the sentence as being Friday was the date of the wedding. That's the main information of the sentence. But of course, how many Fridays in a year? Which Friday, right? Well, Friday, October 13th. October 13th adds additional important information, right? But it's just additional information to the main part of the sentence. Friday was the date of the wedding, so it needs to be separated out. Okay? All right, number seven. Harvey, who came to the party with Joy, says he was kidnapped by aliens. Okay, now this is a kind of an interesting example. Okay, so you have to figure out what's the main part of the sentence. Okay, what is the main information in this sentence? Well, the main information in this sentence, in number seven, is Harvey says he was kidnapped by aliens. Okay, so who came to the party with Joy, again, is additional information, but it's not essential information. Okay, so that's what we call a non-essential clause. So that has to be separated out with a comma. Okay, so Harvey, who came to the party with Joy, incidentally, right, says he was kidnapped by aliens. Okay, now I want to show you something. If you go back and you take out the commas as the sentence was originally written, few of us would make this mistake, but you could potentially make this mistake by reading this sentence. If you were to read this sentence as it's written, Harvey, who came to the party with Joy, says he was kidnapped by aliens. Okay, you could deduce that there might have been more than one Harvey at this party, right? And which Harvey was kidnapped by aliens? Well, it was Harvey who came to the party with Joy. If that's the case, then all of a sudden, who came to the party with Joy isn't non-essential information, it's very essential information. It singles out the exact Harvey, okay? So if that's the case, right, then we don't add any commas. That's a essential clause. But in this case, we can reasonably assume, right, that Harvey who came to the party with Joy, right, who came to the party with Joy is non-essential. It's a non-essential clause, so it needs to be separated out with a comma. Okay? All right, number eight. Is it wrong, my fellow Americans, to disparage your country? Well, this one should be easy for us to figure out because we had a similar one up with number four, right? You, Mr. Gimbal. Who's being addressed here? My fellow Americans. You separate that out with a comma. Okay? All right, so that's mode of address. Okay? Number eight. Is it... Oh, we just did number eight. Number nine. Oh, I have forgotten my appointment with Mr. Leonard. Okay? Again, this one should be easy for us to figure out since we had a similar example, number 5. No, you cannot have a raise. And again, this is an interjection. Okay? All right, so number 10, right? Because number 10 is actually from a reading that we'll have later in the semester. And this is a tricky one, okay? If we were meeting in our normal classroom instead of online, this is the one that would trip most students up, and I would walk you through kind of slowly. So I'm going to read this. This is a quotation, and you have to try to figure out where do the commas go, and there's a hint there, right? There's more than one comma. All right, number 10. Because I wrongly imagined that English was intrinsically a public language and Spanish an intrinsically private one, writes Richard Rodriguez, I easily noted the difference between classroom language and language at home. Okay, and if you look at this sentence, it's exactly the way you would quote an MLA, and we're going to have a lesson later in the session about how to properly quote textual material. So I'm going to show you where the commas go. Follow the cursor here. The commas go inside the second quotation mark, at least in the first part of the sentence. Because I wrongly imagined that English was intrinsically a public language and Spanish an intrinsically private one. Now the question is that a sentence? Okay. Well, there's one word that cancels out the possibility that this, at least this first part of this statement, is a sentence, and that's the word because. And because of that, then you should recognize this as what? Not a sentence, but a subordinate clause. So this is an interesting way that some writers present quotation. This is what we call interrupted quotation. And you can think of it as this, like, because I wrongly imagined English was intrinsically a public language and Spanish an intrinsically private one, wait for it, and then you get the second half of the quotation. It's sort of been sliced and diced. And of course, the second half of the statement is actually a sentence. So because of that, because this is actually one long sentence made up of a subordinate clause, which is the first half of the sentence, and a regular sentence, the second part of the statement, right? And because they've been sort of cut in half, right? This is just one sentence. Then after Rodriguez, you signal to the reader that, hey, there's more coming here. This sentence is not done, right? You have to put a comma. If this was two sentences that we were quoting, then that comma would be turned into a period, okay? That's a little tricky, right? You know, you got to get the hang of that. And when we do our lessons on quotation, that'll become clear, okay? All right, so that's our first lesson on sentences, right? And by approaching our knowledge of sentence through the use of the comma. And again, I want to reiterate, and this will be something that will be on a midterm, which is I'll ask you something like, what is the 3 criteria for a sentence? And, you know, I'll ask you that frequently. What's the 3 criteria of a sentence? And I want it to become automatic, like muscle memory to you. Subject, predicate, complete thought. Okay? Of course, this is just the first lesson in sentence knowledge vis-a-vis the comma, right? What we haven't talked about is different types of sentences, different types of way that you can balance out clauses, you can connect clauses and connect phrases, okay? But that's further on down the line, okay? And I don't want to overload you with grammar. The thing about a writing class like this is that we get writing as soon as we can, and we sort of worry about grammar and punctuation later, all right? Because we all have different levels of skills and knowledge when it comes to writing and when it comes to grammar and punctuation. So I tend to address things as I see it in your writing. Okay, it's not like I'm going to give you grammar quizzes or anything like that. Okay, all right, I'm going to end this because I don't want this video to go on too long. I hope that was helpful.